I'm a sucker for a good cheap massage. So I walked in and something, and the news is talking about busting things, so I'm kind of a little paranoid anyway, but you never think it's going to happen to you.
Right.
And I walk in and it's like the windows are painted black. It's not very homey. It's a little like clinical, and I'm like, what is happening? And I walk up and I say, I'm here for the $20 massage. And her being like, okay, you're going to pay first. And I'm like, pay first? I've never been to a place that have to pay first. And then I gave her, I thought that was kind of weird, gave her the 20. And I was like, I'm not tipping till after the service because, I have to see how it goes. And then she says to me, okay, do you want a lady boy or a lady girl? And I was like, I don't know what that is. And I was being a feminist in that moment. I was like, I want who is best for the job.
Lianna Carrera.
Hello.
You're on Checkitow.
Yes.
So you're Cuban-American like myself. Both parents are Cuban?
No. Just my dad.
Just your dad.
So are your parents
Both
Cuban?
my parents are Cuban.
You out-Cubaned me.
I've double the
Just
amount
like
of Cuban.
that.
But Check It Out is actually, have you ever seen Scarface?
Yes.
There was the Angel Salazar, which was he was the little skinny, not the sidekick Stephen Bauer, but the little skinnier sidekick. He would go, check it out, check it out. So I remember what's stuck in my head. That's where the name comes from. So not completely original. I'm halfway stealing it from somebody, but I'm giving him credit. So
Wait. Is it check it out?
yeah, like check it out.
Oh,
It's
I thought
meant
it
to
said check
be,
it out.
Yeah. But
you
that's
said
like the
out.
way a Cuban, Cubans just kind of like put everything.
I get it.
Check it out.
I
Check
know.
it out.
I get it.
you
Check
know?
it out.
Yeah.
I get it.
So there's a
in
Cuban,
Spanish.
but he's not even Cuban. He was playing a Cuban.
No, but you made it Cuban.
I made a Cuban.
Yeah, you made it. You did it.
I did it. Yeah. Now I'm kind of, it's a little far because we've already branded it. But I was like, should I have just left the T off and then made it OU at the end? But then it would be like chateau, like I don't know.
No, but I love that you had inspiration from a movie. Would also do that. I was thinking the other day, my favorite movie, it's not like my favorite, but it's like I nerd out over it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a movie called Straight Talk with Dolly Parton. Have you seen this?
I know what movie you're talking
It's
about.
like in the late 90s and she accidentally gets discovered. She goes in to be a radio station's like front desk person, and she goes back to get coffee, and she's got a similar name as the new like psychologist they're supposed to put on the air.
Right.
And she's mixing her coffee, and they're like, Kensington, but she's like, no, it's Kendall. We don't care what it is. You're on the air in 2 minutes. Like they thought she was this late psychologist that was supposed to, give advice to like all of this like greater city of Chicago or something. And so they pull her in, they put her on air, and she's a natural. Like she's the secretary. She's like, I'm not supposed to be here. Then the person calls in.
This is Dolly Parton?
Dolly Parton.
But
She
this must have
plays
been to the later end of her. This is the 90s,
this
right?
This was the
cool.
90s. Like maybe when I mean, she's amazing now. But anyway, what I'm trying to say, she becomes this overnight sensation. They throw her on billboards and everything. But it's a movie called Straight Talk, and I was like, I want to host a show called Straight Talk.
That's funny.
But
That
would be funny because obviously not straight, but it would be ironic and it would be kind of cool. And she's so cute in it that I'm like,
I love irony and I love double entendres, and I think it would be good for you to do a show. So let's get into a little bit of your background, and then we'll get back into your comedy because I love the stand up. But your background is your father is Cuban.
yes,
And he was a pastor.
yes.
Okay. And your mother is from where?
My mother is from Italy.
Oh wow. Okay, I have some Italian.
Yeah.
My last name Guida is actually Italian.
Yeah,
and
correct.
she's deaf.
She is deaf.
Okay.
So we explain it to like 2-year-olds that her ears don't work.
Right.
So that's how we explain that. And my dad is a retired Southern Baptist minister for the deaf. So we
Wow.
started deaf like churches growing up in different areas up and down the East Coast.
And you grew up where?
I grew up in Tampa,
Okay.
which is
So there's Cubans there, but
lots
then you
of Cubans
yeah.
in Tampa.
Yeah, a little different, not as intense as Miami.
Right, so they call them Tampa Cubans,
Right.
Because we're a little more chill. We invented the Cuban sandwich.
Yes.
Like we're like this is great, but we can do some better stuff with it. But it's where like the cigar factories were
Right.
and everything like that in downtown Ybor.
Right.
And which that's how my family got to Tampa was being janitors and then also cigar like rollers in downtown Ybor.
But you grew up in Virginia, right?
So we were church planters, right? So we were in Tampa for my early childhood. We moved around a lot. We moved in Miami too, actually. We
Wow.
planted church there until Hurricane Andrew came. It was like that time, and then we moved, and then we ended up in Virginia, which is where I spent like my high school and college years.
Interesting.
Virginia.
So let me ask you this, because and my sister's gay. She's married to an amazing woman, and
congratulations.
Totally congratulations, because it makes I copied this from Larry David. I'm a friendo lesbians.
You're a
Do you know that
friendo lesbians?
You never saw that episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where he gets in trouble with his friends?
Because he says I'm a friend of lesbians. I got to see this.
A friend O.
Friend O lesbian.
Apostrophe lesbians.
Okay. I'll put that on after I'm done watching Straight Talk.
Yeah. But what was it? I think, look, for my sister coming out, she came out around 2021. It was tough, but not really, because our immediate family, we were very supportive. Other maybe grandparents had little issues with it. What was it like for your Cuban pastor father? Was it how did that go, if you don't mind me asking?
So I think it actually starts a generation before my father, because my uncle came out as gay, and now my abuela and my abuelo, when they were they only spoke Spanish, they had to learn English, they had learned to assimilate, and so it was when my uncle came out, it was don't tell your father, and don't tell, or the father. I'm sorry, the father knew, and the father said don't tell your mother, it'll kill your mother, and so they kept that from my abuela until he got AIDS, and then he was dying, and then he finally came out to my abuela on his deathbed.
Wow.
And my abuela was very upset that the father, the patriarchy, patriarchal figure of the family, had decided to not let her know her own son. And so she made a commitment to her son right then and there that she not only would accept him, that she would become an AIDS activist. And so she began going into hospices and taking care of people in their final days, gay men in their final days of AIDS, back in the AIDS epidemic. So that's where it started. So there was this shroud of oh, that's really bad. Now, my father was a Southern Baptist minister.
Wow.
And when I came out, God, it's been so long now, he could have done that. But he said that when he experienced what happened with his brother and the secrecy, and he responded, he said, all the right ways to his brother. He said that I told him that, God isn't accepting and the Bible says, and da-da. He said, I did all that to my brother and it cost me my relationship. And it wasn't until his brother was on his deathbed that my dad was begging for more time, and he was like, wait a minute, I did this wrong. Even with good intentions. He said he was loving about it, but as a gay person, there's no way to be loving about giving someone scripture and, rejecting them. And so he said he had a quiet internal switch, but that did not come to bear until I came out, many, many years later.
How old were you when you came out?
Gosh, I was in ninth grade. What does that make me, 14, 15?
14, 15.
Ninth, I was in early high school. And so, when I came out, he said that he felt he had a second chance. That he had a second chance to respond. He was still a pastor.
Right.
And so what he said to me was, I don't know if it's a sin or not, but I just want you to be happy. I just want you to follow your heart and be happy. And that's what he could say to me. And so the next 3 Sundays, I remember he took off church. He said, he got a substitute. And he took me to all these different churches, and I didn't know what he was doing. But what he was doing was he was taking me to different denominations that accepted gay people. And he was just sitting with me in the pews to show me that there was still a place for me if I wanted it.
Right.
So he didn't just automatically say it's incompatible, your faith, with your sexuality. And he didn't even say anything. He just took me to, and I remember giggling through it, because we went to some crazy hippie churches, and I'd be like, what is going on here?
I'd be wanting to go to those. Those are my countries.
Yeah, and now I would too. Back then I was Southern Baptist, and so we were raised a certain way, and it's a conservative sort of upbringing, and so, but yeah, so it was really cool. So that's my dad. My mother has stayed the same my entire life, for better or for worse. She believes that the Bible says that it is wrong, and that it is, that she cannot accept it because, but what the Bible also says, which is kind of funny and good for me, is that the father is the head of the spiritual household of the house. So my mother trusts my father. So
using some technicality.
Yeah, right. And so my dad ended up accepting me,
right.
And saying he wanted to do it right this time. And so he is a total supporter. He actually ended up leaving the church, leaving his position as a preacher. He says not because of me, but I was the straw that sort of broke the camel's back. And he became agnostic for a while, and now he goes to church just as a regular.
And person. Do you have a faith or?
Gosh, not really. I'm a hodgepodge of, I think everyone's equally right, equally crazy.
Yeah. But you do believe in so. I hate to use the word God.
Yeah.
I was raised Catholic. It's funny. I do want to get into something. I did go to a Southern Baptist school in Miami, Westwood Christian, for kindergarten, kindergarten, first grade, and it was like the remnants of like white flight still, in the 80s. They're in the school, and they didn't take to this Cuban kid. And I was raised bilingually, so I had a very thick accent, even though I was born in Miami. And they're Southern Baptists, the way that they view God can be a little hardcore, a little bit, because with Catholics, we're kind of like, a lot of us are non-practicing,
Right.
And my parents were fairly agnostic. My mom's side was very religious, but my dad's side is fairly agnostic. And so I went through, I started questioning religion right from the get-go, because I just started doing the math. I'm like, where are the dinosaurs in the Bible? Adam and Eve had everybody, but they had 2 sons. I'm not, what's going on here? Second grade, I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me. But when I came out to California and I started kind of experiencing a lot of the New Agey stuff, which I thought was, airy-fairy and silly and all that stuff, I actually started gravitating to a lot of it. So for me, I believe all the religions have an undercurrent of truth, that there is something, but it's also concocted with an agenda by the people, the men that write the scripture. They're going to be inspired by some sort of truth, a deeper truth in the universe. They're also going to include their own versions and agendas. And that's where I honestly think a lot of the homophobic stuff you find in the Bible, I don't think that comes from God. That's not true. That's the people trying to come up, and we're going to figure out what morality is based on our inspiration from God. I don't think that a lot of those rules came from the divine inspiration. I think that they're adding their own little, I think that we should just go ahead and add these rules.
Yeah, I think it's also the interpretation of it. Right. So just because you think the Bible is without error, it's a big mistake to think our interpretation, our understanding of it is without error. It's been through so many translations. But not only that, even in English, if you were to follow the scriptures as they are laid out, it would be impossible. An old friend of mine who recently passed away, her name is Rachel Held Evans, wrote a book called A Year of Biblical Womanhood, and it's a comedy, because what she did was she tried to follow every single legalism, like every single rule that they would have us believe is like, you can't wear mixed fabrics, you can't play with pigskin, so there goes football. You know what I mean? Like she lived like that for a year and documented it, and so dope. The point is, though, we're missing the forest for the trees. Yeah. I think with all faith traditions, it's about goodness, it's about love, it's about connection. It's about connecting to a higher power that could be within us. Right. And if we get caught up on like, well, did I do this from 9 to 12 today? Did I go to this church service? Did I tithe this much? Am I following all these rules? I feel like you almost missed the forest for the trees.
And I do think that following rules can lead someone who's maybe disorganized on the inside to some sort of clarification. But I do think that enlightenment is beyond that. So I think this is very cool. And just going back to the Southern Baptist schools, they used to sing like these songs where they would scare us about the devil, and they would be like, it was like the Freddy song, like 1, 2, the devil's coming for you, like stuff like that.
Yeah, really. Am I allowed to curse?
Yeah, well, every once in a while.
Really
so I don't have to go.
Really screwed up stuff that I would be singing from my childhood, like I'm a Christian soldier marching off to war.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
5-year-olds.
What are we doing? Like,
that's crusade stuff.
Yeah, and it's a lot of that. And then also my parents wouldn't let me listen to what they call secular music. Oh. And so they would change the words to be Christian when they weren't, and they wouldn't tell me.
Oh, that's
So they would
funny.
be like, you spin me right round, Jesus right round. I'm not
That is hilarious.
fucking kidding me. And you can beep that because I earned that F word, right? Because that's insane. That's insane. Like, you can't just change that stuff. They told me the song "Don't Break My Heart," my achy breaky heart. They ended it with "Jesus Christ came in my achy breaky heart and gave me peace and quiet once again," or something like that. It was always
okay,
about
but your parents
Jesus.
are fun then.
They're freaking weird, but they're also fun.
Oh, I love weird.
They raised a gay daughter, so that's kind of the biggest joke of all. It's kind of like, oops.
Or it makes a lot of sense. So how did you get into comedy? I mean, you seem like you have the personality for it, obviously.
Oh God,
and the background.
I definitely have a lot of material to go from. It was sort of an accident. I always wanted to like run for Congress and be a politician. Like I majored in political science when I went to college, and I was class president and 4 years in a row we were just running a fundraiser, and the judges were taking like way too long to figure out who the score was for the person that was winning like the pageant that we were like throwing on. So I got on stage, I just started talking into the microphone, and I started actually performing Ellen Degenres' Here and Now.
Oh,
I was just running lines. I mean, I went to a women's college. I was killing.
Which Wesleyan?
It was Here and Now. Oh no, it was a women's college called Randolph-Macon Women's College in Lynchburg, Virginia. And if you say it really fast, it sounds like Random Naked Women's College, Randolph-Macon Women's College, Randolph-Macon. I did it wrong, but we have shirts that say Random Naked Women's College because we know it sounds like that. Anyway, I was up there doing Ellen Degenres, like, what's the deal with Go-Gurt? Like, we're in a rush. We can't just take it slow to eat some Go-Gurt. And people were like laughing so hard. And I was like, well, let me just slip in some of my own stuff that I always thought was funny. So I told a terrible joke about mattress liquidators and how mattress doesn't belong in the same word as liquid. You know, like, it was terrible, but they thought it was Ellen. So they were laughing and laughing. And I was like, interesting. And then I told a story about, I don't know, growing up with a deaf mom and how I used to steal my report cards out of the mail when she wasn't looking, and like how I distracted her and stuff. I was telling my crazy stories. They were laughing, and then my roommate came up to me and said, "You're not supposed to be in politics. Like, you're supposed to be a comedian." And I was like, "Really? For real?" Because it was like all politics for me up until then. I had interned on Capitol Hill, and I had really thought I was going to go create public policy, like really boring, like wear a pantsuit and like a, what was it, a BlackBerry, and go to Georgetown in D.C. and like, oh my God, I would die if that was my life.
But you know what I think? This is a sidewinder, but I think we need more comedians in government.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we do. I do too, because we cut through the bullshit and we know how to handle a heckler. And Trump is the ultimate heckler. I mean, he's just a troll.
Yeah.
And we know how to be like,
Well, the Democrats lost someone that could have hit him hard.
Yeah.
With the Me Too, with what's the Minnesota guy? Al Franken. I thought he could have dressed Donald Trump down in a one-on-one, and maybe he'll come back and he'll be like the pit bull. Once kind of he serves his time. I think next year, someone like Al Franken would be the right kind of person to attack Trump, because Trump won't be able to do his thing where he just kind of like dismisses somebody with a name or a joke, or an attempt at a joke, I should say.
Right. Yeah. No, I would love to do politics and stuff, but probably not.
Probably not.
I was like, I like much more being able to tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And even if I am hitting heavy hitting subjects, like I just totally skirted away from the Al Franken thing because it's so controversial that I'm like, what do I want to say about that?
Yeah.
I know I just don't want to be.
Then you have to overthink it, and then you have to worry about
because I will say this, that Justin Trudeau just got into a lot of trouble in Canada with doing blackface, and I find it very interesting the cultural conversation around it about, well, it doesn't have the same historical meaning as blackface in America because they never had slavery and things like that, but it's still freaking offensive, and it's shocking to see him.
To me, it's stupid on his behalf. More, I don't think
him being stupid.
It's him being stupid. I don't think that he had the intention of being offensive. But listen, Justin Trudeau, have you seen his interviews? Not the sharpest tool in the
You don't think so?
shed.
I disagree. I think that he, like he said, he had enthusiasm over costumes. I love how I'm like, let's pivot to a less controversial subject from Al Franken to Justin Trudeau's blackface, where I feel more comfortable talking. No, but here's where I'm going with it. Here's where I'm going with this. I just think that that we are against opponents who are literally passing legislation that has built-in racism, and it's making life harder for so many of us. They're using codified racial language every day. They're actually racist, and we're all racist. I mean, I do believe we're all born.
Everyone
racist.
has a bedrock of discrimination,
absolutely, and I feel no qualms about admitting that, because we all have work to do. And when you say I'm not racist, you're saying I don't have work to do. I don't believe that. We all have work to do. But my point is that I was reading a New York Times article by like a civil rights elder, and she had said that what we need to learn as a younger generation is how to call people in instead of calling people out.
Love that.
So how do we figure out who are the good eggs with the good hearts who have done something wrong, and how do we allow them to be called in by the communities and to be taught? And even though then it gets into, well, who's responsible for the teaching? But this idea that we can save our own, that some people are worth the effort to educate, and that's what my hope is for Justin Trudeau up north. Even though I can't be the final say on that because I'm not that community, I can say that the person he's running against is like we're running all over the world. They're running against like right wing zygotes or bigots like Donald Trump, and so all over the world we're seeing it. So call in instead of call out.
I love that, and the way that I think that we do that is we open up the dialogue again, and I think that sometimes right now on either side, I think that people want to just kind of exist in an echo chamber because they don't want to have to swallow having to deal with someone that they disagree with so fundamentally in order to find some sort of common ground, and then the people can get pulled in. I'm a radical centrist in the sense that I think that you need all sides to find a balance. I think balance is very big, and I think that there's a place for everybody. And I think that when people, even bigots, sit in a room with the people they're bigoted against, alone in a room for 5 minutes, that bigotry can really be chipped away. Because I think that a lot of the people that are very discriminatory is because they don't even deal with these others. They're very far removed. So I'm gonna rescue the seriousness. I'm just gonna say this one last thing about Justin Jordan. I think he's a nice guy and all that stuff. I don't really see a lot of intellectual wherewithal, there. But and
I
so
get distracted by his looks, I guess.
yeah, he's a good looking guy.
I think he's, yeah.
But I will. The only issue that I have with him in this thing is, I'm big on hypocrisy, and so if you have asked for other people to be removed from positions and you've been adamant about it, and then you get caught doing the same thing, you gotta reap what you sow.
Has that happened?
I think that they were pointing out where he's kind of come down, and so I'm thinking to myself, when he's come down on people that have been caught. I think he made some statements about the Virginia, which was clear cut blackface, as opposed to him. He was just like, I really like Aladdin. I want to go all out with Aladdin.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I give him the benefit of the doubt that it wasn't a racist
I didn't realize
thing.
that.
That it was just a. But the thing is that he was under pressure to do that. Listen, politicians, they're going to be put under pressure to call people out based on their advisors' poll numbers, and then if they get caught doing the same thing, they're going to be put under pressure by their advisors to just try to ride the storm. It's politics.
You know what I think?
Yeah.
I think more women need to be in power.
Oh, of course.
I know it's so crazy for me to just shift it.
Sure.
And I feel like the problem with so many of our political leaders is that there's this performance of masculinity.
Right.
Performance of masculinity, where they feel even if they're wrong, they can't admit it. And
Now,
they
there's
can't
some
actually
female
come to the table
leaders
with
that exhibit that as well, though.
You're right. I know you're right. But as a whole, I feel like it's just time for women to take over.
Listen, I respect that
Speaking
opinion.
of, now I'm the host of Checkitow.
Well, you know what? Look, you know what I like about
kidding.
you?
I'm
That
just
you
kidding.
go through these kind of minefield conversations, but you bring it back to something funny, and that's why I think that you have a lot of potential as a comedian to kind of cross lines and audiences. I was watching that bit that you did where you read the Vanity Fair article, and you were saying, the thing about a little bit lesbian or a lot ugly or a little ugly was better than being a lot ugly.
Oh my
and I hate to
gosh.
Step on your
It's
joke.
okay.
But it's at the, so
Well, we
as
have to
you're
explain
going
it.
through it, the audience, if you're if you're performing for a mixed audience, I don't just mean gender, but I just mean ideologies and mentalities and attitudes. You might have some that I like where she's going, and some like where she's going, but then the way you bring it all around, I can't imagine anyone with any sense of humor not laughing at your punchline at the end. And not all comics know how to do that the right, to
Yeah.
bring it back to the humor of it.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to reach now because you're talking about a joke I made many years ago, but I'm going to try to find.
God, I
remember
saw the
it.
2018
Yeah,
upload.
yeah. Oh, maybe I actually did include it in my comedy special
okay.
that I just filmed
Yes.
at the end of last year.
Everything-
It's for Seed and Spark. Everything is
Okay,
fine.
everything's
Yeah.
fine.
I said Vanity Fair came out with an article that said women aren't funny unless they're a lesbian or ugly.
Right.
And I said all my straight women comedian friends were really pissed, but I was like, okay, that's cool because not only am I, completely a lesbian, I'm also a little bit ugly,
I
which
don't
is
agree with
better.
that.
Which is better than being completely ugly and a little bit lesbian.
That's funny.
And so I brought that around. That's what I did. That's
Well,
one of
I
my
love
favorite
bringing
jokes.
it around. It's a lot of comedians will try to go into a minefield situation and they won't bring it back around, or they won't bring it back around successfully, and they'll lose a lot of the audience. I think that the trick to making something funny is going ahead and finding that circling back.
Yeah, you have to be able to do that. But you know what? You also have to be able to fail a lot. I've failed a lot more than I've succeeded in terms of when I'm developing my sets and I'm out there or working on, working on my jokes. Some they haven't always been that tight. That's what we say. They're tight or they're not tight. I mean, they haven't always been that tight, right? So there's a lot of failing that happens too.
And how'd you get into the After Ellen Live? And how did you, you were doing Ellen as a kid or as a teen. How did you hook up with...
I was doing Ellen as a teen. What do you mean by that?
Well, you were saying, when you said that with the first time you did stand-up comedy, that you were doing Ellen bits. So,
no.
So,
That's just, so After Ellen was just a website, a lot like, not a website, but it was an outlet.
Okay.
A lot like LATV in
Right.
terms of it was catering to lesbian and community. That's when I first moved to LA, I got into hosting a little bit. I thought I was gonna be a host, but I don't think I'm gonna be a host anymore.
Well, but hold on, you're on the Q agenda here at LATV, which I forgot to mention. So you are hosting.
I know. I think your job is so interesting, but they put me on like the red carpet at I think it was the Emmys or the Grammys.
Oh, I can't understand red carpets.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was sweating. We're at the very end of the line.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to stop for us. It's 200 degrees. We have $20 in our bank accounts. I'm like, this is not the life.
No.
This is not the life. And then when someone does talk to you, what do you know? I didn't know what to ask them. So here's the thing, as you've noticed, maybe you've noticed this. When I'm on the red carpet, what are questions you ask someone on the red carpet? You ask someone like, "Oh my gosh, I'm about your project. What are you wearing?
Yeah.
How are you? Oh my god,
I never ask what you're
there's
wearing,
drama." Well, somebody tweeted, and I like can't stand that kind of stuff.
hate
So
it too.
I would have like Mindy Kaling on the carpet, and I would be like, "So I understand you're a gynecologist in your episode because your mother played one before she passed. Can you tell us more about your connection with your mother?" Nobody wants to answer that on a red carpet.
I love, but yeah, that's the way a red carpet interview should be.
I'd have producers like, "No, you asked Jane Lynch about her dog, not about her hearing loss."
God.
I'm like, "But Jane Lynch has a hearing loss. We should address it."
That's hilarious.
How does that impact her? Like, so I'm a naturally deeper person, like in terms of conversation.
Well, look, when I was on the red carpet, so what my style would be, I would probably get 2 questions at the most. So my idea was get the obligatory question about whatever the project, happy to be here, that kind of stuff. And then get some offbeat question that I'd usually come off at the top of my head, maybe reference some weird thing that just happened on the red carpet, but those would drive me crazy. There's some people that actually enjoy it.
Yeah,
but
it's like mindless, which is a good because there's a whole there's reality television, things like that, which I've purposely not done in my life, even though I've been offered some opportunities. I've been like, that's not the way I want to go. I think I could have got a lot bigger, like quote unquote bigger, a lot faster.
Right.
But
But you're selling a piece of your soul.
I want to be true. I want to be true to who I am and who my brand is because I've not been true, and it doesn't end well. It doesn't. It just feels.
Wow, that is amazing. Okay, that's something to live by. I have not been true, but it doesn't end well. I know. I'm just making a note here. True.
Yeah, I mean, and then you feel icky. You look back, and I mean, the Indigo Girls. I'm gonna quote them. They're a '90s lesbian band.
I know the Indigo Girls.
You do. They said, every 5 years or so, I look back on my life and I have a good laugh. And I'm trying to get to the point where I don't look back on the last 5 years of my life and have a good laugh. But you know what I mean? Like, so you try things, you get into the wrong relationships, you get into the wrong jobs, you get into the wrong, and you're like, what was I thinking?
Wow.
And so I think you have to like tune your inner voice a little better. And so when I got to LA, and as you know, when you get to LA, you think you can do everything.
Right.
Because you're like, okay, I can write, I can do this, I can do that. And then you get in these situations with people who are telling you who you are as opposed to who you really are, and you're trying to figure out what message you have for the world, And so I spent a lot of the first years at LA doing kind of silly things that are cool for my resume. Like I got to like host the Emmys on the red carpet. That's cool.
Nice.
But I saw Julia Roberts from like a foot away and almost passed out, even though I'm not like I don't get, starstruck or anything. And now I don't even know what the question was.
Did you ever meet? It's just keeping true to yourself, especially when you first get here. I want to get into a story that you talk about, but before that, did you ever meet Ellen? Have you ever met her?
I have seen her in passing. She walked by at the GLAAD Media Awards. So no, I've only met her wife a couple times on the doing carpet things. Yeah.
So is
that
there
sounded
a thing?
Very bad.
Do you
Nobody
think...
caught that joke?
Wait, her wife. Wait, say that again. I'm sorry.
Nothing. We're backing off that very accidentally lesbian joke I just made about carpet things with her wife.
Carpet.
Oh, God. See, sometimes I like to be blue out of nowhere.
Hold on, listen.
Because you won't get it very much from me.
I have. Okay,
so
can I make a sex joke? I haven't seen a carpet since 2004. I'm just kidding. That's a joke. I have. I know. Because do you think Ellen deals with this thing where they're like, okay, now every lesbian comic in town wants to meet me, and they think that I'm just gonna give them a chance?
No. Yes and no. I think Ellen is very well protected. We don't have access. We're not like all like knocking. Well, I knocked on Ellen's door last night. You tried tonight. Like we don't get access.
She's gonna
to her.
love us. We're lesbian comics.
No, I wish there was more mentorship, but she's got writers and people in her domain. But I also think comedy is like a defense mechanism too.
Right.
So I knew in high school, well, if I'm gonna walk around with a shaved head and rainbow braces, I better have a one-liner that goes back to these people who are bullying, you know, or who would think I'm weird, but I can win them over through comedy.
Well, there's also and so when you think of especially traditionally thought of attractive women, they don't necessarily need that defense mechanism. Their defense mechanism is to make guys, nervous that they're in the presence of this attractive woman.
That's what's happening right now. I was wondering why you were sweating
You
so
have
much.
amazing eyes. No, I sweat all the time. I sweat all the time.
Okay.
You have amazing eyes.
Thank you.
And that's why the bit about being a little bit ugly
No,
is you have like
listen,
captivating eyes.
I
and
say
I'm
don't feel
captivated.
bad for me because I'm.
Well,
Yeah,
now,
I bring it
since
back.
you acknowledged me sweating, I'm just gonna go like this.
I didn't really see you sweating. I was totally actually calling.
No, I was.
making a
I
joke,
sweat under
yeah.
these lights. I'm an Aries double, and I'm highly caffeinated. And I'm Cuban, and I start sweating like all the time. Very cool. Well, let's get into a little bit about the Cuban roots. So your dad's Cuban. You come off as very white.
Yeah.
Okay. What are the Cuban aspects about you, and what are the things about Cuban culture that you just don't get?
Yeah. Oh my God, this is gonna be fun. So think about it. So when my abuela and abuelo moved here, were brought here over from Cuba as infants, they only spoke Spanish. And what they wanted more than anything, which I think is interesting to see embodied in me, was to learn English and to assimilate, And I think my story is not uncommon for a lot of second, third generation, immigrants to this country, where the sort of gentrifiers, let's call them, would take our language and sort of say take away my original language that I was kind of supposed to have and give me the language of whiteness, right? And so my grandparents thought that the epitome of the American dream would be to have a family that is, for better or worse, white and spoke English and goes to church and is not Catholic, and you know what I mean? All the things that sort of separate us out as immigrants. Their goal in life was to sort of want those things. And so I think I simultaneously am their dream come to life, but also without them understanding that it's a sort of a broken heart behind it, because I do only speak English.
Well, you said abuelo and abuela, so
I call them
a few
abuelo and
Spanish
abuela,
words.
a little
Okay.
Spanish, yes. But my dad speaks fluent Spanish. My mom is deaf, like I said before, and so a lot of us, we learn our language from our mothers. And so my mother had to teach me sign language. So I'm fluent in American Sign Language. All of my cousins are in Miami and Tampa. They speak Spanish fluently, and they sound like you. When I go over to there for the holidays, I'm very left out.
It's culture shock.
Yes, so it's like a weird combination of both having a deaf mother who sort of introduced me to deaf culture over Spanish, like Latin culture, or a father who said he could not. My first language was Spanish. He said he could not keep up with me English, Spanish, and sign language.
Wow.
So one of them had to go. So I had to learn English for school. So
But do you notice, aside from the language, do you, especially when you go to Miami, do you notice the general personality of the Cuban culture?
Yes.
Very strong, in your
Yes.
face, animated,
Yes.
loud. It's a lot,
Those are
right?
you're describing my cousins, and yes, and so it is that, and it's I feel. It's kind of weird because I'm just sort of journeying back into what does my Cuban side mean? Like, who am I? Am I allowed to claim it even though it's my blood? And I feel so. Is this a part of LATV, the podcast?
Yeah.
I feel so weirdly at home here because it's almost like my community is saying, come back.
Yeah.
We're still going to make space for you. We understand that what they did to our parents and our grandparents to assimilate may not have been so great now that we're realizing we've lost, a little bit of our culture and our not our ancestors, but the people who are coming after
Right.
us. And so I feel a very purpose being here. Even though I am completely Americanized, I feel such a sense of purpose being here that it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. That's, so I have, even though I come off as very Cuban when people hear the accent, and my personality is fairly Cuban, I always kind of felt American amongst my Cuban family. I had an uncle who was more assimilated, and he had the rock albums, and I got into rock and roll, and then on my own, hip hop. And when I heard Cuban music or Latin music, it's like, this is my parents' music. I didn't want to speak Spanish, even though I spoke perfect Spanish as a little kid because they raised me bilingually. I actually had to learn English in the Southern Baptist School, which didn't do me any favors. But, I'm very proud of the Cuban culture and how strong we are. That being said, I have a joke about how you can't have more than two Cubans in a room. Like, if you think one Cuban in the room is too much, you're racist. But if you think two Cubans in the room is too much, you know Cubans. It's a lot. Like, when I go back during Christmas vacation or anything like that, it's just, it's so, and what I'm realizing, it's a mirror of who I am. Like, when I'm with my parents, I realize how much I hate myself. My dad is the most impatient person in the world, and I realize I can't take his impatience. It's almost like a mental illness, how impatient he is. He can't even get through listening through a conversation without cutting you off and just trying to just jump to the conclusion so we can go on to something else. And I realize how impatient I am. My mom won't shut up. And I realize how much I talk. So it's like I'm hanging out with my parents and I'm like, I can't stand myself. So I had an easy time moving 5,000 miles away. And, just like being away from it and being around different people. I love being around, because Mexicans are very different in a lot of ways from the Cuban culture. They're very calm. They're very, it's also a different racial makeup when you look into the history. They're more mestizo, we're more European and mulatto and African. All these differences come out, especially when I moved here. And then when I go back, I can't be in Miami for more than a week. I have a great time with my friends.
Is it the humidity? Because it's
everything.
It's sticky.
It's
as
the people
hell.
too.
Yeah.
The people, I love them, my friends, my family, but they're just like a lot. And I realize I can be a lot. And we talk about like our evolution. My personal evolution has been to comes in with the spirituality, just to try to find a little centeredness, because even when I'm here, I realize, okay, let me tone myself down when I'm coming, because sometimes I feel like I come at people and it's not the way I intend to, but just the way I talk, it's loud, it's fast. And I've had to like tone that down.
It's like blowing my mind. So see, I missed all of that. I missed that because I was raised in deaf culture, and very similarly, there's a whole culture. It's sign language. There's like how we meet, how we gather, our cultural norms about how we get people's attention. It's okay to touch people.
Right.
It's okay to be blunt. They're very blunt people, the deaf people. Like my mother will be like, "You've gained a lot of weight," and maybe the Cubans are like that too. I don't know.
Well, that's probably her Italian side too.
No, I know, but she's blunt, and so I get that. Like where we also really cherish eye contact, and and not a lot of cultures. Our cultures do, but it's constant eye contact, which is weird.
Do you have
for
Asian
some people.
friends?
Yes.
Asians that came from Asia, not American Asians, but I've made a lot of Asian friends. I was actually engaged to a Filipina several years ago. Don't ask how that went. We're still best friends, but I wasn't ready for marriage, or a kid, and all these things that kind of came with it. Or
Every
the Filipino
5
family.
years, you look back on your life
and you laugh, and you laugh.
You go, what?
But
was that?
Asians from especially China, Japan, Korea, not so much the Filipinos actually. They're very they're actually kind of Latin, but if you speak to them, looking at them the entire time, they're kind of like looking like stop. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You know what's funny? Going back to my Cuban roots, my great great grandfather was the first president of the Cuban Club in Cuba. So I'm a member of the Cuban Club, and we go back and like my family's pictures line the wall.
Wow.
My family was.
You're
Cuban,
probably a Mason.
Cuban.
They were Cuban Masons, but if he was like in charge of stuff, he was a Freemason.
Okay, but listen, then my dad, he decided to become a pastor, and he sort of moved away from Tampa and away from the Cuban family, and he raised me evangelical, which is another culture. My mother, deaf. So I almost got like kidnapped by people who didn't know how rich their own culture already was.
Right.
You know what I mean? So here I come back at age 18. I'm like, I'm back, world. They didn't F me up too bad, and I want to know everything.
Have you been to Cuba?
I haven't.
Okay, you got to go. I went to Cuba. I actually wrote an article about it. I'll send it to you.
Are we still allowed to go? I thought they like months ago Trump reversed everything.
He made it tougher, but if you are of Cuban heritage, you can make it a family trip. And just say you're going to visit family.
I have family there. Yeah.
So I went in 2015 when actually a week after Obama had been there, and I stayed with my lone remaining cousin, and it was like. It was kind of like Twilight Zone-ish, and when you arrived there, it seemed so familiar. Especially for me, because I grew up in Miami. Maybe a little less for you, but for me, growing up in Miami, it's like I recognize these people. They talk the way I talk. Yeah. They talk the way my grandparents talk, and I felt, like I've been here before. At the same time, Cuba, especially being in this, communist time warp situation. Where people, Cubans are very loud about and expressive about so many things, but they whisper if you bring up anything political or socially important or stuff like that, So it was whereas in Miami, it's everybody's screaming and arguing and loud and all that stuff. So, but I really recommend anybody of Cuban heritage to go back to Cuba. You can find a way to do it. It's a little more complicated. You can always fly through Mexico City or the Bahamas or something like that, and it becomes easy. I want to ask you though, when you moved to LA.
You talking about the hooker who gave me a back massage?
You've
been
did
smiling
that really
the whole
happen?
time. Yes, that actually
So
happened.
you went by a masseuse place and
First of all, let's
you-
calm down.
Yeah.
Okay, it was an accident. I saw a sandwich board that said massages $20 for the hour, and
That's a simple mistake. I thought there are $25 foot massages if it says foot massage, but
no,
a $25
it was
full
a
body
straight massage, and I straight up massage, and I'm a sucker for a good cheap massage. So I walked in and something, and the news is talking about busting things, so I'm kind of a little paranoid anyway, but you never think it's going to happen to you.
Right.
And I walk in and it's like the windows are painted black. It's not very homey. It's a little like clinical, and I'm like, what is happening? And I walk up and I say, I'm here for the $20 massage. And from what I can remember,
little musty.
You're asking me something that happened like 7 years ago. So I'm trying to remember every detail, but I remember going up and her being like, okay, you're going to pay first. And I'm like, pay first? I've never been to a place that to pay for. And then I gave her I thought that was kind of weird, gave her the 20. And I was like, I'm not tipping till after the service because, I have to see how it goes. And then she says to me, okay, do you want a lady boy or a lady girl? And I was like, I don't know what that is. And I was being a feminist in that moment. I was like, I want who is best for the job. Like, I'm trying to keep a straight face. My brain's going a million miles an hour. She just said lady boy, lady girl. Why would she say that? This is a massage parlor. So I was like, whoever's best for the job. Okay, well, where? She said something about, like, where in your body. And I went, okay. So I turn around and I point to my upper back, to my lower back. I'm like, from here to here. I don't know what was happening. I've never had to point out the spots of my body to the receptionist before. So we go back, and I just remember it feeling like it being sort of like a cot. Like a cloth cot. I think it was. I wish I could remember. But then I kept all my belongings with me and I laid down. And this person comes in and they're like, and I'm using gender neutral pronouns because I'm not sure what's happening. So they come in and they say, "Are you sure? Like you just want this?" I go from here to here, and they're like, "Okay." So like 30 seconds later, they come back in and they've got a walker, like an old person's walker, and I proceed to get a massage like my little sister's giving it to me. Like you think like a back massage from someone who may not be a prostitute, I'm not sure what's happening. You think they would be like, no, they're just literally. Have you ever played the game with your siblings where you just chop on their back? Chop, 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 chop. Literally, they started chopping on my back.
But do you think that she, and I'm using she only because Ladyboy maybe would also use she, but so I'm making an assumption here, or they.
We're
I'm
covering
just
a
gonna.
lot of ground on the show today. Is this how serious it usually gets with all the guys?
No. No, this is my attempt at a joke, and then I realized, I'm being serious. That was not a joke.
Yeah.
But okay, so did they realize that you were actually there for a real massage? And I'm like, oh.
Yes, I think
One of these
so.
Confused people again. This happens once a month.
I'm sure.
And then
I got up, and then they took the walker, and then they just sort of like pounded my back with the walker,
Right.
like literally an old person's
Because they
walker.
didn't even know how to give a real massage.
And they were like, done. And I was like, okay. And remember, I don't know if you saw the end of that. I walked out, and my car was up on a tow. My car was up on a tow truck out front. So the lady, when I had been driving by, and the lady saw I was looking where to park, the lady told me where to park. So I parked, and I'm new to LA. I'm not looking at signs yet. Well, it's a towaway freaking zone right there, or like after a certain time.
You cannot trust these madams of these massage parlors.
My car was up, so yes, I got a $20 massage, but I also, and the guy was like, if you give me cash, I'll put your car down. I didn't have any money. That's why I'm in a $20 massage to begin with. I didn't have the $400, $300 cash. He was right. I was parked illegally, and so they towed my car, and I walked home, and I had $1 left in my pocket. I bought a Slurpee, and I laughed like the whole way home because I was like, I just got like bamboozled, which like that makes sense though.
LA.
Bring it in with
me.
a cheap massage, and then maybe have a partnership with a tow company where maybe if I paid him cash to put my car down, he kicks back some cash. Doesn't that make sense? It's kind of smart. I can't be that, but it's so upset about that.
Listen, you gained years worth of street smarts in that one night.
I did,
right?
Oh man! And my neighbor at the time lent me the cash to get out and to get the car out. And now she's a series regular on a TV show, which I'm not going to say, but I just love how we came from like, we have no money, can we help each other, to like, you can make it in LA. You know what I mean?
Now you also lived in MacArthur Park?
I lived in MacArthur Park.
What was it like?
I didn't know. I loved it. I loved it. I had a beautiful place for not that much money. It was 20-foot ceilings and brick walls and big French doors. And
were you friends with like cholos and some of the people?
No,
that,
I wasn't. I think I was. I think I didn't know enough to know what. I just didn't know. I just loved the space. I'm all about my space.
MacArthur Park is awesome. It's very historical. I like old parts of LA.
Yeah, it was difficult because there was like no Starbucks, but it was a lesson in like
Do you like Starbucks?
Not really, but no one really likes Starbucks, right? We all just go because it's like.
Because
there.
I like coffee, and I'm just like, it's all by the way, the moment that we get a sponsorship from any coffee place, I will cut this part out. Starbucks, Coffee Bean, Pete's.
You're like,
that's
done?
the worst.
Yeah, it is the worst.
The worst coffee in the
It is the
world.
worst.
You got to go to like mom and pop shops. Like
I have some more stories about MacArthur Park, but we'll wait for another time because I don't want to introduce myself to your audience with these stories because MacArthur Park, my time there was crazy.
I definitely want to bring you back, and I want you not to be afraid to get, especially with political stuff, because I want to tell you about my political evolution.
Okay.
Because I've come to a place where, you know, I believe that we're all gonna come together post-Trump. It's not gonna happen during Trump.
Yeah. Have you seen season 3 of Stranger Things?
No. What happens there?
Have you seen season 1 or 2?
Yeah, I'm on season 1.
Okay, there's a mind flayer, the big spider that goes through the town, and like I feel he like eats people's brains, and they become like zombie versions of themselves. I feel like that's where we're at right now with the Trump supporters.
But I feel that look, we've been, and we're gonna sum this up a little bit because we do gotta be ending the show. But you and me I know we can speak for hours on this. I believe that I'm old enough to remember in the 80s and 90s when the youth was fairly politically agnostic. I was a raver in the 90s. It was very apolitical. It was political from the sense of we're going to change the world, but completely. Mm-hmm. Forget about left, right, and all that stuff. All that. A Republican or Democrat, like most of us at the time, this is late 90s. What's even the difference, right? Politicians are all corrupt and all that stuff. But we didn't even get political. It was more about just higher state of consciousness and aliens. And some of us are spiritual and, moving past what we know society to be today. As I got older, especially during the Bush years, I became more politically active because I thought that the Iraq War, I saw it for what it was. It was, blood for oil and those kind of things. And the country really started to become very political and polarized, really the second term of Bush, 2004. And it stayed very, very polarized through Obama, and then through Trump, it's peaking. Mm-hmm. I feel that once Trump leaves office, that the extreme sides, like the water that's crashed up against the walls, are going to kind of come back to some sort of middle. But I think they're going to come back more informed. I think that people are going to kind of I think that we need to have, I think that we're triggering all the steam that needs to vent, especially when there's a lot of oppressed groups that haven't had the time to vent said steam. And I think it's all coming out now. So I'm hoping that post-Trump, there's this coming together, of different people, different races, and even political ideologies, that a person on the right side of the fence and a person on the left side of the fence can kind of just find a common ground and just respect each other enough.
Well, I think the good news is that in real life, like face-to-face conversations haven't gone completely to SHIT.
People get along.
Right. And it's when real life becomes Facebook that we're going to be in trouble. And Twitter. Right now, there's a very distinct civil war happening in our phones. And when it comes out into real life, then we're going to be in trouble. And I like what you said. What worries me the most is not people, but is cable news are on two different ends of the spectrum.
Realities, right?
So the rise in division in Congress is actually can be paralleled by the rise in popularity of our cable news stations.
Right. Here's also what happened: profit margins. That's why I brought up the case when that CNN and MSNBC weren't it's not. I mean, obviously, I work in the media. There's obviously going to be more liberals, but I don't think it's a case of hey, we got to do this for the liberal causes. I think they were looking at the numbers. And they go, I think that we need to take a note from Fox. Fox is making a hell of a lot of money, and there was a time when news departments were financial losses. They were public services, and now the news is completely for profit. So I think that maybe it'd be, I don't know if I want necessarily state-run stuff, although PBS is that, but I do think maybe we need some sort of non-profit news organizations that just report the facts objectively and can maybe present both sides. Look, for me, the evolution is ultimately we're gonna get beyond a lot of this as humans evolve into this, because we're kind of coagulating like race mixing, and we're finding also gender wise that we all have masculine and feminine sides. It's not, we don't have to, we're not all that, so there's kind of we're going from being very separate to kind of we're gonna start overlapping and uniting.
I've never heard the word race mixing before. Did you mean? Is that the correct way to say that? That feels very offensive. Are you supposed to say race mixing?
No, I mean people when a black person or white person.
Interracial. something.
Are you trying to get me on a technicality? I
am
didn't mean
not.
it the wrong way.
I just want to make sure that we are responsible to the conversation. Listen, I think you're absolutely right.
But what's wrong? But let's back up, because sometimes I think sometimes people will grab a term and then be like, wait, this could mean this in a negative way.
See?
But when I mean race mixing, I mean when you have two different races as parents. That's really just what I mean.
So that might be what you mean, but I don't know if that's correct. That's why I'm trying to really say.
Well, just educate me. How could it be? How could it be negative?
Here's the thing. Well, race mixing sounds like what a KKK person would be like. We're
but they say don't.
Mixing.
But they say don't race mix. What if I say do race mix?
I know, but I still think that the terminology is wrong, which is why we need someone who actually knows about the subject to educate.
Well, can I just make this point? Because when it comes to these things, I think that sometimes people co-opt terms and language when the terms and language in and of themselves were not presented negatively. So when I say race mixing, I really mean just that. I mean two people from different races mixing.
I don't believe that it's at all.
But because you've heard that term,
I'm just trying to figure it out.
No, like, I think I'm trying. I understand because I run into this whenever I just use the wrong term.
Yeah.
But when you hear race mixing from a KKK preceding that term with don't do, then the don't do seems to be lumped in with the race mixing.
I could be totally wrong. I could be wrong. I think what I'm learning here is that when you go on podcasts, you're supposed to be an expert at everything. You open your mouth. You know what I mean? And I'm not, so I can't be that. But I can say that I will for sure Google it afterwards to figure out how we can be better at expressing what we mean without using their language.
Well, but they made it there, and it doesn't have to be there. So here's my pushback on that. Mm-hmm. So it's not just in how I express myself, but it's also how it's received.
Yeah.
So I think that people can also make an effort to be genuine about how they receive it, and not jump at the most negative interpretation of what they're hearing.
But think about what you're asking, though. Think about what you're asking, because there's a lot of people who are undocumented citizens in the United States, where the other side will call them illegals. And,
I hate when they say just illegals. That's grammatically incorrect. First of all.
It is. But I've sat with friends who have good hearts. They're like, they plead their case. They have good hearts. They say, "What's wrong with the word illegals? That's what they are." And I go, okay. And so I think that this is why what you raise is a good point. People who don't mean it, but there's a reason that we open the door to more people, because we have to find out crap like this.
Absolutely. Well, I will say this, just to differentiate between the words, the word just labeling someone illegals, which is grammatically incorrect, first of all, and you're all actually harping on this thing. And what I said before, which was what I meant, mixed race people. People of two different race parents, I
think mixed race is fine. Anyway, I didn't mean to belabor the point.
But this is a good conversation because I think we can find a middle ground.
And this is what it goes back to what we talked about in the very beginning too, about calling in, trying to figure it out as allies.
Call me in.
But I can't call you, and I don't know the answer myself.
But you are. Well, we can kind of find. I mean, what we're talking right now is a little subjective, so there might not necessarily be an answer or the answer, but there can be a better understanding.
Sure.
And what I meant by I don't think, okay, so if somebody uses the word illegals, they're harping on actually a negative thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Whereas sometimes people might be like the little faux pas that I might have stepped to earlier. Yeah. They might say a term that in and of itself is not negative, but you've heard somebody insert it into a negative context.
Sure.
Like, oh, race mixing, don't do it, it's bad. And they use that term, whereas other people might use interracial. But I think that there's moments where it's like, well, what does this person really mean? Do they really mean something negative, or are they just using certain words that you've heard people use in a negative context, but they're not? But you can tell they're not using it that way.
Yeah.
And so I think that we can be more careful. Like, I'm gonna be a little bit more careful about next time I'll say interracial.
No,
like you're making a mental note.
I don't want you to feel like I don't.
But I don't want. But I don't want to be taken the wrong way. So for the fact that I don't want to be taken the wrong way, it's important for me to be educated on it.
Yeah.
But I always want to give a little counter of also be
show some grace. I think that's what you're talking about, grace.
Also, give me the benefit of the doubt, especially if it's on the line or it's in the gray area. Like, give the person the benefit of the doubt, and then ask them to explain it. And then if in their explanation it turns out that they're racist as hell, then you can call them out instead of calling them in.
I agree. Okay? I agree. That's a good one.
Listen, you and me need to talk more. I feel like we could talk forever.
Yeah, I'm like, I hope we didn't go over.
No. This is gonna be a longer one, and I want to come back, and I want to have this. I know, like you were saying, like on podcasts, you got to be careful and all that stuff, and I want to be careful. careful, but at the same time, I want to have you come back on and feel free to
But here's the
explore.
thing, you don't have to
some of
be
these.
careful on podcasts if you're like a decent person. I don't think you have to be careful. I
Well,
just think
that
it's
goes
fu-
into
it-
the way
what's-
it's received.
I think it's funny that this guy who was just on SNL. He did for one day he got
Right.
hired to do a podcast. He
Yeah.
got hired, and then he got kicked off because of something he said on a podcast.
Right.
Which I have no sympathy for him. I'm not trying to say I have sympathy for him, but what I am trying to say is that it's okay to be like, hey, I'm not going to make fun of Asian people on this podcast because I'm not actually a
Right.
racist person.
Do you think there's a way back for him of like, because if you watch the video, there is a part where he's being dragged into it by the host, and I think he was humoring him, and there's a point you can see in his eyes where he kind of realized, I kind of went into that. Is there a way to come back from that?
I think it's all about the apology. I think that it's what it's all about. I think men and women, but men need to learn how to apologize better. I
Right.
really do. I just think it's a way to say, you know what? Oh my God, you're right. I sound like an idiot. What was I thinking? You know what I mean? And offer. And when you apologize, you are supposed to offer something to make it right. Like you're supposed to offer something. And I feel like I think the way people handle the fallout almost compounds the initial aggression.
What if they're being true to themselves and saying, well, I didn't mean it that way, or I was joking, or I'll never say it again, but I don't want to necessarily empower.
I think that's a question for the audiences. As a comic, I can tell you that I'm mortified to think about where I went or what I tried to do and say. I don't think there's anything like that's like blatantly racist that way, but the whole world, our whole consciousness is shifting. And I'm like the Indigo Girls say, every 5 years you look back in your life, you have a good laugh. I think that goes with your comedic material too. I think that you look back and you go, wow, I could have been a better person. I should have been more evolved about that joke. And you can use that to make your stuff better. I think the problem with that guy was that it was like 4 months ago. Like it was like in April.
And you know what else? Just
we
as
can't
a
even
fan
use
of
that
comedy,
as an excuse.
it wasn't funny.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. If you got to make people laugh.
If it wasn't
I got my
funny,
start actually doing stand-up comedy in front of all deaf audiences with a sign language interpreter, and I was making deaf jokes while I was doing in my microphone, and I was making jokes about being the kid of a deaf mom, and I would say these things in front of deaf people for a reason, because if they laughed, I knew that I had done my job correctly, that if I empowered the people who I was supposed to be representing instead of making them the butt of the joke, then I've done my job correctly. And it comes down to who did that guy empower in that moment. Just to pick up on
that a little bit, I've always said that if I hear a non-Cuban comedian make fun of Cuban people, and I'll give you a couple examples, and I'm going to call somebody out, although I hope I don't ruin his life or career or whatever. But if it's ignorant, if you obviously don't know Cuban people, or if you're making fun of Mexicans and you're not Mexican, and it's obvious you are getting Mexicans wrong, that to me is offensive. But if you're making fun of a group of people, but it's obvious you hang out with them, you get them, it's coming from a place of knowledge. So I'll give you an example. There was this guy, Todd McGraw. He sounds like a guy that would say, and he goes to me. He doesn't know Cubans. He's lived in LA his entire life, and he goes, oh yeah, tell your Cuban mom when she's after she's done with her maid shift, or being a maid at some, and so. Here's my problem with that joke. I go, you're very ignorant. Not that there aren't Cuban women who are housekeepers or maids or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way.
Sure.
But you really don't understand. In Miami, where I'm from, Cubans actually make up all the classes, including the upper class. And you also have to understand the history of Cuba, that a lot of professionals left Cuba and stuff like that. So not that there aren't Cuban maids, but if you knew Cuban culture, that wouldn't be, and not that you should be saying that about other Latino cultures where there might be a higher representation of manual labor, because it's maybe lesser economic people that are coming from those places and they have to take. But if you understood Cuban culture, that's not the joke you'd make. You might make a joke about us being loud and obnoxious.
Right.
But making a joke about my mom being a maid, you've never been to my, so that rubbed me the wrong way. Not that I'm being, maybe there's a part of like you being, it's Cubans proud, but it was the ignorance of the joke. You don't know who you're making fun of.
And he's punching down. I mean, he's punching down. That's what makes jokes.
Well,
icky.
Cubans would say they're punching. He's punching up.
Yeah, no, but he's punching down in the scheme. Was he a white comic?
Yeah.
White male comic. He's the top of the food chain. He's making jokes about people below him, and that's not funny. He's got to figure out how to be smarter.
But can I say this?
Yeah.
Do you think that if the comedy industry makes punching down, and I have to put that in quotes just because, so taboo and offensive that there's certain comics that are like, I just want to break the taboo and offend people because it's going to be shocking. So are you guys creating a trap where some people want to punch down just to create the shock value that's being created when...
No, I think that those comics are being weeded out. I think they're losing their platforms because we are demanding. And I think that also, I also think that the greats, even like Richard Pryor, the greats back, they were not punching down.
Well, then who does a white male comic punch then?
Who does he punch? He makes him. So that's a really good question. And all of us deal with this as comedians with our material.
Right.
Usually it should be us. Like we are what you are doing is you are giving a voice to the disenfranchised. That's what comedy is.
Right.
Comedy hasn't traditionally been power. Comedy's been people who are trying to observe and make fun of existing structures and systems in a way that the person in the audience laughs, because when they laugh, they're saying, me too. I get that. That happened. We're relating on a level that's bigger than us. And so when you have a comic that's just that's called being mean. That's not called comedy.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And if there's no punchline, then you really got to sit down.
That's exactly. I think that just circling back to why I like your comedy, regardless of I wouldn't consider your comedy angry. You actually have a great disposition, but regardless of where you take it, you always kind of bring it back to somewhere where everybody can laugh at. Yeah. And I think that weeding out the comics that really just want to either make a point or be angry is really not what comedy is all about.
No, yeah. To me, it's about ushering to a place of greater truth. And if we can all get there because I made a fart joke, then even better.
Okay. I love that. Lianna Carrera.
Thank you for having me.
You've been on Checkitow.
You're so sweet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.